but that's not what we're here to talk about.
No,
Uh,
yeah. Thank you for wrangling me into this. Tell me tell me all the stuff and tell me how I can be of help and what topics to speak to, and I'll try to be succinct.
Tell me how you marketed Finding Pattersby, how you got it out there.
It kind of it came in line with doing a crowdfunding for it.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was a little bit by design because so it's such an like so Finding Pattersby is a weird fiction mystery. Falls into the people will say audio drama or narrative fiction podcast. Basically, it's like a made up story, a made up version of like a true crime series, true crime podcast, right? With a really ridiculous bend. But so I so okay. So the audio drama world is like a very super niche world, and it's like any kind of scene or whatever community. It's you can't really just kind of burst in and say, "Hey, listen to my thing," You kind of have to not prove yourself per se, but sort of no one's in it really for becoming rich and famous. Um, so you kind of have to like the thing to do the thing alongside with the other people who like the thing, who are doing the thing just to do it. So I was already a fan of that, of these types of podcasts. There was one called The Message pretty far back, and there was, the bigger ones were like Limetown and uh the BBC had done a really cool series where they kind of reimagined a lot of like HP Lovecraft stories, but in the form of like like this is BBC, like official BBC like ecosystem, but it always take a supernatural bend. So I liked the thing already. So I was sort of mixing it up in that world, becoming friends with people on social media over their podcasts. And I don't mean like, you know, dear friends or anything like that, but in the way that you can on social media, where you quote things you liked about what they did, or, signal boost their latest output. And, by doing that, you sort of start to brush elbows with people who actually do enjoy kind of trading um whatever joking around with online, like you kind of like you find out, oh, you actually outside of this thing you might like similar things anyhow, you like the same movies, same video games. I started to see there was a you would see sort of the adjacent worlds or scenes next to audio drama, right? So there's a big tabletop role playing contingent, professional wrestling, video games, music production. uh So all that to say, I'm getting way off topic here. How did I actually promote it? I tried to boil it down to a succinct um, representation of what the concept was. And I also tried to make it so that succinct kernel had almost an appeal to it, that people could attach to something familiar already, right? So it's like if you were a band starting out and your manager was like, this band sounds like Nirvana led by Lana Del Rey. Like that's like the really ham-fisted way of doing it. But I would try to do all the heavy lifting for my potential audience.
Yeah.
So mine, I would call it a weird fiction mystery. Um, there's a lot of absurdity in my show. I would there's a narrative element to it that gets helped by the detective genre. You know how detectives and maybe noirs or whatever will just narrate of the meeting with a femme fatale, or narrate, you're in their head a lot, right? Like, I didn't trust this guy as far as I could throw him, but he had the only clue. Like so that there's a blueprint for that already. So I tried to think of all the different areas that would apply to what I was making, and uh, see how I could boil it down into almost like a one line. you and I both have a biz background, so a pitch, right? A log line for how you wanted your show to best be represented, but not in a way where you just pulled it out of nowhere. Like it had to be accurate to the idea that you were trying to push too, because ideally you get the butts in the seats, but then you also get those butts to stay. So you don't want to trick somebody. You don't want to say, this is this because I think you'll like this. You kind of have to be true to what you're trying to pull off a bit. So there was a little bit of soul searching in terms of what, and you can go a little bit crazy with it. But um, so I would try to basically think about what I wanted my idea to be. I would look at how anything was really advertised, down to like Paul Rudd going on talk shows to advertise Ant-Man. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, if Marvel and Paul Rudd still have to get out there and like get in people's ears about these big budget ideas, then that just must be the game. You just must have to get this idea out to every single person that you can and hope that some percentage of them like follow through. And I would do that with every. So okay, so with the crowdfunding, that was almost like a campaign, like a commercial. It provided like a framework of a promotional marketing campaign for
How
my
much
show.
money
And
did you raise through crowdfunding?
I raised a little under $2,000, and that number itself was a strategy, because there's a whole thing in
Yeah, that's
crowdfunding where
right.
you don't want to overreach. You don't want to. You kind of want to be like humble or meager about it, because that's an advertisement in and of itself. Because after you hit the goal, you can say this is a successful crowdfunding campaign. Clearly, there's some enthusiasm for it, right? I was able to pull in all the favors of all my friends, like Helen Harlan, to to pony up. So there's a little bit of goodwill. Oh, that's the point I was trying to get to. Was so because I was entering this world of audio drama and I was sort of an unknown there, but I did have a history of doing some work in animation and television and comedy writing. I had, friends and goodwill and people who could speak to my ability to pull those things off in some fashion, right? So I thought, okay, I can use that almost as references. I can use them as endorsements of my ability to pull off an idea, without them specifically saying that, but to say, if I'm going to get this campaign successful, I'm going to have to work with the people who are already kind of like either have goodwill towards me or who are fans of what I have done or can do. And that's also a pretty basic like promotional tactic, is you start with like your core group of enthusiasts or fans or diehard, um, you know, if it's a punk show, the four people who show up to every show, and you really try to nurture them, right? You want to get them excited, because I mean, I have to speak about this in very Spartan terms. I have humanity in me, but and speaking in just purely in terms of marketing, it is like their enthusiasm becomes almost like contagious, right? It's like if there's a line coming out of a guitar center, you want to see what's going on inside that guitar center, um, ostensibly. But so you kind of want to start small, nurture the people who are enthusiastic, and in some, what I've seen since then is there is sort of a growth that happens, like people will show up looking like the same way I showed up to the audio drama scene and said, I'm looking for more of this stuff. I know it's not super popular, but I'm looking for more of it. People still do that. They still trickle in. And then you'll see every once in a while your show get recommended as like a super niche thing. Like, um, hey, I'm looking for something weird they have very specific demands. The same way you can have very specific music demands. Um, so that's, I guess, yeah, long story short, I used the prompt of a crowdfunding campaign, both for like almost like a deadline for myself and a framework for myself, but also to justify my efforts too, to say I can't just take a break out of life to do this, because I got a kid and the world was in turmoil at the time and still. in some ways for his.
Okay.
But yeah. And so you kind of have to like, I had to really plan it out. I'm not a great planner. I'm more of a, you know, get on the page and follow the word. But like it was necessary. And sometimes I think that is a thing where it's like the gap in the gap that you're not necessarily used to or want to do is like sometimes you find out you're actually pretty good at it, or you at least come at it with like an original angle if you force yourself to address it. So I was forced to really come up with like think about what visual representations I wanted to put out to represent my show. So it's very consciously all my the artwork for my stuff was very consciously done in a hand drawn way. And I mean, I thought about this like no one's really going to probably pull this out of it, but I thought, okay, well, my show is kind of set in a adjacent to like a literary academic dark academia type world, and that's kind of what I always liked about like books and bookishness. um so I think I was thinking of like the Catch 22 book cover because I was
Yeah.
like, well, I was like, what, down to like the colors of it, and also just the how do you or how do you do that, like almost New Yorker drawings too, where you're like, okay, what's this sort of like messy, no nonsensey um aesthetic that also is tied to something that can be seen as like legitimate. And it could have been overthinking, but like that, not for me. I just kind of have to check off all those areas for the thing to make sense to me, to come up with just like this answer is like I have to take this interview to get to the thing. um and so yeah, crowdfunding, that put me sort of elbow to elbow with other creatives who I like, whose shows I like and whose shows I still listen to, and we trade niceties. And another big chunk with podcasts is promo swaps, where everybody kind of stands to gain something by adding to their audience base. There's some who already have like huge established audience bases, but you'd be mistaken to think that they don't want to add. They need to increase, just like any huge company, that growth has to happen, right? They don't want to flatline. They want to constantly be adding to the pool. So you have more incentive than one might think as a small show like me to do a promo swap where essentially you put a trailer for someone else's show on your RSS feed, and it's like an opener for a musical act or something, where it's suddenly their idea is in the ears of the people who are connected to your platform, right? And then if it's a clean trade, they'll just do the same for you, where you put your trailer on their feed. And it's all I have never done the actual, I don't have a marketing department or anything. So, but I know there are departments out there who could probably like track what what the success rate is of things like that. So there's a little bit of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, and I think that's what's kind of hard about it is you just kind of are there doing it, but you don't really have a metric for seeing what action leads to what kind of growth. Although with our show, I do know that like we have been growing since we launched. Like, and that's not every 2 or 3 days, there's like four more people who have like subscribed to it through all the different channels that it's available. So I take that as like, well, someone needs this, that we are a small but, you know, strange and mighty group. Um, I don't get to work on as much as I'd like, but so yeah, I guess that's how I promoted it was all that stuff I said. Have some coffee.
That was great. That's all, honestly all I needed. And I'll cut this, and the folks coming to the journalism event can listen to it, and I'm sure they'll glean stuff from it.
Okay.
Yeah.